And I always look forward to speaking to our next guest, former KGO host, friend, and regular contributor to the Mark Thompson Show, John Rothman. John, it's great to talk to you again. And I have a feeling you have a lot of thoughts on not only
the one thought I have is, I don't know about you, but Mark Thompson made me a promise that I would get some of those baked goods. And I want you to know I am sitting here, mouth-watering, without them. So I suggest that we put the heat on Mark Thompson and get our bonus.
Kim, I think you're being called out here because you are our collective conduit to Mark. And so for the sake of the show and the sake of the health of John Rothman, let's make sure we have that happen. But John, let me get to the serious part of the conversation.
Serious stuff?
Yeah, there's some serious stuff we got to cover. Yeah. Let's just play word association. If I say Iran, you say
disaster.
If I say Pete Hegseth, you say
bigger disaster.
If I say dignified transfer, you say
American tragedy.
If I say regime change, you say
good idea if the people rise up themselves.
Now, let's dig into these topics. In Iran, we have the president who is telling us one thing when the evidence on the ground and also in the media is in stark opposition to it. Is there anything that the president is telling us in a way that we can glean, which is good news?
Let me explain that Donald Trump is the most dishonest man to ever sit in the presidency of the United States. By the way, I listened to your monologue. I agreed with most of it. I want you to be aware that Donald Trump, to me, as someone who is known as a scholar of the American presidency, he is the most despicable man to ever sit in the White House. And I think the reality is that it will take, unfortunately, some time, but eventually the American people will understand this is the biggest scam artist who's ever sat in the Oval Office. Now, having said that, let me be clear. I am no friend of the Iranian regime. I understand the threat that they represent. All of my friends and family who live in Israel understand what it would have meant if Iran had had a low-grade nuclear weapon like the one we dropped on Hiroshima, which was low-grade, you understand. Israel would have been destroyed. The Israelis have an intent. They have a reason. They have a logic, because they're fighting for their own future and their own lives. What is America's interest? There is no doubt that one can make a case that Iran has been responsible for the death of countless Americans. And yes, you can go all the way back to the original revolution in 1979, the hostages, what happened in Beirut. You can go through all of that. But the simple truth is that Donald Trump and his administration have a problem. And that is they don't understand the truth. And I think that is the great fault. You used an example that I think is so critical, and I talked about it in my own podcast. And that is the question of what happened at that girls' school. Can you imagine originally the blame was put on Israel? Turns out it wasn't the Israelis. Then Donald Trump said it was the Iranians. Well, it turns out the Iranians don't have Tomahawk missiles. And finally, the real bottom line is it was the United States of America who made a mistake. And what you do when you make a mistake, Mo, is you admit it. You stand up and you say it. And you'll see on the screen right now, those of you who are watching, Made in USA, fragments of missile that bombed the girls' school in Iran. You don't deny it, you say this is one of the tragedies of war. But I've used an expression which I did not coin. It is the coin used by Robert McNamara, the former Secretary of Defense, who said it was the fog of war. Well, let me assure you, as someone who lives in San Francisco and is completely familiar with fog, this is not fog. This is fundamental dishonesty by the Trump administration. And who do we hold responsible? I want to be clear on this. Donald Trump is responsible. He calls the shots. He says he's the ruler of Venezuela. He says he's the guy who's going to control what happens in Iran. Donald Trump is responsible. And the team that he has around him, including Pete Hegseth, who is the most incompetent Secretary of Defense. Note, I said, Secretary of Defense, not Secretary of War. There has not been a Department of War since the 1940s. This is criminal. And may I also suggest to you that what the Department of Homeland Security is doing is unbelievable. May I make one other point? I know you've got a lot of things
Sure.
to have to spew all this out. Can you imagine that the Department of Defense and the Department of Homeland Security removed the people who were the most expert on Iran? Who the heck is guiding this thing? And so my concern is not that the Iranian regime is being decimated. I'm delighted it's being decimated. I'm not concerned about the question of what we are doing in terms of our own best interest. What I am concerned about is that Donald Trump is not being truthful to the American people. Talk about a credibility gap. This guy has such a gap, it makes the Grand Canyon look like a small hill.
We know this president perceives any type of apology or admitting fault, fallibility as some form of weakness. And of course, it's one of his greatest character flaws. But when it's just the character of the person involved, it's one thing. But when it involves national security and also taking our service members into war, it's a different conversation. Now, the president has said that, and I think Marco Rubio has said that this is supposed to be a 4 or 5 week excursion, the president's word. Let's say we do pull out militarily in 4 to 5 weeks. What does that mean? What might that mean for unfinished business, collateral damage, consequences as far as coming back the United States way?
I can answer you very clearly and very precisely. In 1956, the United States made a pledge to the people of Hungary. If you rise up, we will protect you. And let me point out to you, they rose up and we did not, and they suffered the iron boot of the Soviet Union for decades to come. The people of Iran are thrilled, I believe, at the overthrow of the Grand Ayatollah. And I think they understand the stakes. But you cannot tell a people who have no weapons, no ability to fight back, when you have a revolutionary guard in Iran which is ready to continue. And by the way, we now know that the Russians have been releasing information about our strategic locations to the Iranians. Let me tell you one thing. We are lucky that the Iranians don't have the ability to respond the way I think they'd like to. And I think that is something we need to understand. Look, I don't mourn for the destruction of their nuclear program. I don't mourn for the destruction of their missile delivery system. I don't mourn for the death of the Grand Ayatollah, whose son, we are told, was slightly injured, which is why he has not been out in public. I mourn for the people of Iran. Do you know, have anybody thought to think what it's going to cost to reconstruct what we have done? I'm always reminded of Curtis LeMay, the former head of the U.S. Air Force, who once said about Vietnam, we're going to bomb them back to the Stone Ages. What Donald Trump is threatening to do is to destroy Iran. And you are correct, and I want to commend you for saying it. We have created, without any question, a generation of terrorists who are going to respond to what we have done to them. And so these are real issues, and there are real consequences, whether Donald Trump is president or not. But the American people are going to have a reckoning. One other quick point. That has to do with Congress. This Congress, a Republican-controlled Congress, has rolled over and played dead in the face of what Donald Trump is doing. The abuses of power by this administration, including Florsheim shoes, disgusts me. But what angers me is that the Congress is so unwilling to tackle. And the Republicans, and I know you and I disagree, you have a feeling the Democrats are not going to do so well. At least I listened to you in your monologue, and that's what you said, I think. I believe the American people are going to rise up come November and throw the bums out. I think you're going to see the greatest repudiation of the Republican Party that we've seen in years. And the indicator is, look how many Republicans are retiring from Congress. They can see it coming. And may I tell you, if we fail in that, we're in trouble. One last point. I want to talk about Donald Trump, who is talking about a proof of nationality in order to vote in an election, the so-called Save America Act. It is the closest thing to subverting the American democratic system that we have ever seen. And thank God it will be defeated, because Trump does not have 60 votes in the United States Senate. But do people understand the subversion of the American democratic principle, which Donald Trump is now pursuing? With every ounce of vigor that I have, I intend to oppose what Donald Trump is doing. I intend to do it vocally, and I hope that all of our listeners will understand clearly what Donald Trump is doing is an assault on us, on our democracy, and he cannot get away with it.
I think you might be getting ahead of yourself, and I mean this respectfully, John Rothman, if only because the elections are in November.
That's correct.
I don't know what this country will look like between now and then. I don't know what this world will look like between now and then, because we know that Putin is to your point, an active participant in what is going on in Iran. We know that Kim Jong-un is starting to rattle his saber and even launch some missiles tests today, and threaten the United States.
Remember
and
the
South
love
Korea.
letter? Do you remember, Mo, the love letter that Donald Trump got from the leader of North Korea? And by the way, don't forget Ukraine. Every day, the tragedy in Ukraine continues to unfold. I'm just pointing that out because you and I could go on forever. The tragedy is that this needs to be understood clearly by the American people, by Republicans. I know the Democrats will oppose them. Republicans have to speak out clearly and precisely.
And also, we know that since the Republicans, we can agree the Republicans are fearing the midterms and what the midterms mean. For those who say that this war is part of a larger strategy to upend the midterms or somehow throw the midterms into doubt where he can declare martial law, do you think that there's any truth to that?
No. And I'm going to explain why very clearly. Read the Constitution, which Donald Trump does not do. States control the elections. And that means that you cannot have a federalization. There was one time in American history where there was a talk of suspending midterm elections, and that was 1942. And the Democratic leader of the Congress, the Speaker of the House, Sam Rayburn, joined with his Republican colleague, Joe Martin, who was the minority leader from Attleboro, Massachusetts, and both said under no circumstances will we cancel elections. The bedrock system of America hinges on free, fair elections. Do you understand that what Donald Trump is proposing with his so-called Save America bill is the disenfranchisement of 20 million Americans? 20 million Americans. That is, without doubt, a crime against our country, against our democracy. Let me tell you, Mo, we don't know each other that well, but you know that I worked for Richard Nixon. Had Richard Nixon tried to pursue something like this, by God, the Democrats and the Republicans would have been up in arms. So my suggestion to people is keep your eye on what is happening and make sure, we must make sure, and believe me, as long as I have a voice, whether it's here on the Mark Thompson program or whether it is in my own podcasts or in my speaking engagements, and I'll be doing a number of them today, I intend to pursue this with every ounce of vigor that I have because we are fighting for the future of our country.
Let me push back on that. And all of that is well reasoned and constitutionally sound. But we have a man, to your point, who does not read the Constitution. He does not respect the Constitution. He does not respect the rule of law. If you give a mouse a cookie, they want a glass of milk. If you give someone a rope and think he's a cowboy. We have a president who continuously pushes the line to see if there's a boundary. Congress has not provided that boundary. The Supreme Court, with the exception of tariffs, has not provided that boundary. So if there is no boundary, who's to assume that our institutions and our norms are going to be able to hold, because this country has never seen anything like this, at least not in modern times.
The boundary is November. It is an election, and the American people will go to the polls. And the job of the Democratic Party and those in the Republican Party who are willing to raise their voices is to alert the American people to the danger, not just the danger of what is happening in Iran, but the danger to American democracy. And this, to me, is the key. Now, I have arguments with our beloved leader and fearless leader, Mark Thompson, all the time, because he says, John, your faith is misplaced. My answer is, I saw the Supreme Court on a 6-3 vote. Rise up and just say no. And I believe there are more and more members of Congress on the Republican side who are upset and understand their own fallibility. You understand the first rule in politics is to win the next election.
Right.
And if Donald Trump becomes what I believe he is, a handicap, the Republicans will understand. The problem the Republican Party has is how do they get out of this mess? And let me point out the two leading contenders in 2028 are J.D. Vance, who has called on America to be a Christian nation and who I think is thoroughly disqualified from ever being president, and Marco Rubio, who has shred whatever bit of decency he had by going under the thumb of Donald Trump. And that means that there has to be a revolution in the Republican Party. Now, is that possible? There is no more Republican establishment.
Right.
I always remember Donald Trump Jr. standing on the ellipse on January 6th and saying very simply, it's no longer the Republican Party, it's the Trump Party. What a disgrace. And may I point one other thing out? I just love you, Mo. I'm so glad you're here. See, Mark Thompson would have cut me off, but you're being a mensch. I appreciate it. Let me just tell you, you saw the plaque that went up in the Capitol?
Yes.
In an obscure, small, unvisitable place for all intents and purposes. The fact that members of Congress, the Republicans, refused to stand up and condemn what happened on January 6th is, to me, appalling. And did you hear that Donald Trump is now subpoenaing, having the Justice Department, which should be independent, subpoenaing the returns from various states in order to prove election fraud? I mean, this is out of control. And I know we're reacting now to what's happening in Iran because it's the headline. But we've not forgotten, and I know because I listened to your monologue, that I want you to know I listened to you. We're going to be talking about the Epstein files.
Nobody does selling better than Shopify. Shopify is the home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not-so-secret secret, with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts go abandoned and way more sales going through. So if you're into growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. On the web, in your store, in their feed, and everywhere in between. Businesses that sell more, sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout that Skims uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period for 3 months at shopify.com/Westwood1, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/Westwood1 to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/Westwood1.
Donald Trump is clearly up to he's in thoroughly on the Epstein scandal. He was Epstein's best friend. And let me tell you, if Bill and Hillary Clinton can testify before Congress under oath, so should Donald Trump, because there are answers to questions. And one of the key questions is, why is he covering this up? And he is covering it up, ladies and gentlemen, without any question. So there are a million things you can say about Donald Trump, but I will tell you he is the most dishonest, the most despicable, the most anti-democratic, and I mean that in the small d sense, president the United States has ever had. And we need to be able to respond. Anyway, you'll notice I have no opinions.
None at all. But to your point, I want you to check out this clip of the president talking about the Save America Act. This is from today, and I want to get your reaction on the other side.
Wonderful.
Go ahead, Tony.
Right.
Is Senator Thune listening to you when you say you want to pass the Save America Act? He says there aren't the votes to do it right now. What's your response?
Well, he's got to be a leader. He's a leader. He's got to get him. It's the most popular bill I've ever seen put before Congress. And it's voter ID and it's voter. You have to be able to be a citizen to vote. It's called citizenship. And we're also adding in no men playing in women's sports, no transgender mutilization of our children, and no mail-in ballots, fake mail-in ballots. We have none of that, except in the case of the military, etc.
Obscene. Can you imagine And let me tell you, he won't have the votes, and he shouldn't have the votes, and it ought to be repudiated overwhelmingly. If the so-called Save America bill were to pass, it would mean the destruction of American democracy. And if those of you listening believe that I'm extreme, you should be able to read my mind to see how thoroughly moderate I am being in my comments.
John Rothman, I love being able to dialogue with you. I tend to see myself as a bit more cynical than you. I think America is at this point where it's going to have to go through hell for it to know to never come this way again. And because of that, Donald Trump is going to be given more leeway than any other president.
I don't believe it. And you and I will fight this out just as I'm going to fight it out with Mark Thompson. But the condition is we receive our sweets from Mark Thompson.
Yeah.
Did you hear that, Kim McAllister?
Kim, you've been called out twice in one conversation. How about that?
And may I tell you, I don't know if you've been watching, but Kim's daughter has been performing. And I get all the emails from you, Kim. And you may tell your darling daughter, who I have had the pleasure of meeting, how impressed I am by everything she does. And don't worry about your future, Kim. Your retirement is secure.
Thank you, John Rothman. It's always so good to have you on the show. Big love.
You too.
John, have a great day.
Mo, I look forward to doing this again. Tell Mark to take more time off, will you?
Okay.
All right. Thanks.
See you soon.
You can find John on his podcast, Around the Political World with John Rothman. That is every day. It's just a few minutes, I think 5 or 10 minutes, the podcast. He puts it out every day. Maybe it's going longer and longer these days. There's more and more to talk about. You can also find John Rothman.
Minutes. It's
15 minutes
every day. We now have sponsorship, and I'm delighted to tell you we have slightly more than 250,000 downloads, which is not bad for a podcast.
Around the Political World, gaining steam. You can also find John Rothman on The Voice of San Francisco. The website is thevoicesf.org.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.